Taking you live into the Bahamas from WeatherStem's Nassau Cam. The Bahamas is under hurricane watch as Dorian approaches right now with Category 2 strength winds. But you know what? It's going to get a lot stronger than that as it approaches and eventually moves through parts of the Bahamas. The weather there is going to get a lot worse.
Now, on social media, we've been asking for you to get your questions answered by using hashtag hurricane questions. So we've been getting a lot of questions from you about Hurricane Dorian. Let's go ahead and answer a few of them throughout our show right now, and we're going to continue to do so throughout the day. Here's a hurricane question number 1. Anthony Vendetti, currently driving to Hilton Head Island, South Carolina for family vacation. Will this area be affected and when? We do have some graphics to show that kind of corresponds to that overall area.
The answer is yes. I really believe you're going to be affected significantly in South Carolina and probably North Carolina. Now, is it going to be from a landfalling hurricane coming in off the Atlantic like that? Or is it going to be coming from a weakening but still very dangerous hurricane moving up from the inland regions of Florida and Georgia? Either one of those ways, bad weather is very likely late next week coming to the Carolinas, especially the coastal Carolinas.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, they might actually be okay if they're planning on going for Labor Day weekend. They might be seeing some early impacts, but for the most part, what do you think, Dr. Postel, as far as Labor Day weekend through Monday? Yeah,
I think the Labor Day weekend looks fairly good weather-wise, but the problem is that we've already seen some of the migration of people away from Florida, and the traffic patterns and all the other stuff that goes along with major evacuations, although not ordered yet. We know people are already preparing and moving away from Florida.
All right, we have more questions. Let's go ahead and pop that one up. This coming from James Earl. When Dorian hits the Bahamas, could it alter its course? I think the resounding answer is no.
Right. No, the Bahamas are not big enough to really have an impact on the structure or the movement of Dorian. But very bad weather and significant life-threatening conditions are likely across the Bahamas late in the weekend, late Sunday or early Monday.
Yeah, I mean, and the impacts, I mean, we already have hurricane watches in place for the northern Bahamas right now, but I mean, storm surge is going to be something that we'll talk about in just a second, and that could definitely be coming into play for us here in the States with Florida, and we're going to be talking about your evacuation zones here in just a second as well. All right, third question. Let's go ahead and pop that one up. Brandon Honeywell, if Dorian makes a direct landfall, will Central Florida feel the full force of the hurricane, or will we feel it after it dies off a little more?
That depends where the landfall is, right?
Yeah, a lot of questions with that one, even that we haven't quite gotten answers to just yet.
So I think the question is, if it makes landfall where the official NHC forecast has it making landfall, which would be south of that region, there would not only be direct impacts, maybe not hurricane force winds, but maybe hurricane force wind gusts across Central Florida initially with that landfall. But then the problem is that Dorian slows down and then moves northward, bringing potentially a prolonged period of very heavy rain and hurricane force wind gusts throughout the early part of next week. So yes, hard to escape that.
And we've been super saturated across Florida already, seeing numbers running above normal for this time of the year. So flooding is going to be a big concern with the numbers that we're seeing. All right, Patricia Klein, 84, coming in with a question. How is the pressure related to the strength of the hurricane?
Generally speaking, the lower the pressure, the stronger the winds. But what really matters is the pressure gradient, the change in pressure. So in other words, if you have a very large storm with a low pressure, you would have strong winds. But if you make that very same storm smaller with the same pressure, you'd have even stronger winds. So say like a 920 millibar hurricane spread out over a very large area will not have as strong wind as a 920 millibar hurricane compactly centered right around the middle of it. So size matters in that way, but generally speaking, lower the pressure, stronger the wind.
Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of give you perspective, this pressure with Dorian is right now, it's 972 millibars. That hasn't changed. This is the latest update, and it didn't change from the previous one.
That's right, and if that pressure lowers, expect that wind to go up. That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned knowing your evacuation zones and why it's so important, as we do expect advisories to be issued for Florida later today. As Dorian does approach, that will likely mean and warrant evacuations for many of you along the east coast of the Sunshine State. So I posted this on my Facebook page, this website, but you definitely need to have this in mind if you're in Florida, visiting Florida, have family, friends, check on neighbors. Everybody needs to be aware of their zones. FloridaDisaster.org. It's critical that you do know that. As we take a look at these zones, notice up here in the right here, I'm going to walk on this side. Up there is the key. Zone A is in the red, and that would be the very first zone to be evacuated if you do get those orders, which will be decided in the next 24, 36 hours by local officials. You do want to heed those warnings and those evacuation orders. Let's head north. Fort Lauderdale, just outside of Zone B here, but right along the coast, the Barrier Islands, you're in Zone A, and then we also have Zone B. And heading up towards Boynton Beach, Boca Raton, and West Palm Beach, we're looking at Zones B, C, and even parts of D and E a little bit further north and impacting you in Jupiter. And across the Cape, that's Zone A, the entire Cape. In Titusville, you're in Zone B. Rockledge, getting close to, it's hard to see right here, but there's a little spat of yellow in there. So that's Zone B right there for you. And further south, Melbourne, you're in Zone D. Daytona Beach in the pink, Zone E for you. The Barrier Islands, all in red. New Smyrna Beach, you're close to the A, but B is definitely for you. And Oak Hill, you're in Zone D. We'll continuing tracking Hurricane Dorian. Stay with us.
This program brought to you.
Tevin Wooden is on the ground in Vero Beach with how Floridians are bracing for a hurricane, potentially the likes of which they haven't seen in decades. Welcome into the show. I'm meteorologist Liana Brackett alongside hurricane expert Dr. Greg Postel. And Dr. Postel, east coast of Florida as well as the southern tip of Florida could see catastrophic hurricane status. It's unlike anything we've seen since Hurricane Andrew.
You know, if you were to think about some of the worst case scenarios for a hurricane landfall, having a major hurricane like this one, it would be one that comes in, slows down, makes a direct impact, and just inland or along the coast, then follows the coastline for days. That is the kind of scenario that we may be dealing with Dorian. A major hurricane landfall followed by a prolonged sort of moving along the coast thereafter, carrying its impacts well inland and for an extended period.
Yeah, let's go ahead and show the details on Dorian right now. We do have it still at a Category 2 hurricane with 110-mile-per-hour winds associated with it. It's moving northwest at 10 miles per hour, so it has slowed down just a tad since the previous advisory, and it's just outside of the northwestern part of the Bahamas. But on the right-hand side, still things absolutely beautiful, calm in Elbow Cay, Bahamas, and on the Lauderdale by the sea on the bottom right, we've seen occasional thunderstorms rocking the view right there. But Dr. Postel, there's still many things that we have to tackle: the strength, intensity, and of course the track. The track is the big one.
There's a lot of things to sort out, Liana. You're exactly right about that. And I think we need to sort of step back and be patient with all the new data that comes in, because there's going to be more and more of that. We know the forecast will change a little bit. The intensity maybe will change a little bit, as will the path. But what we think now coming up into the Bahamas is a significant weather event, obviously with major Hurricane Dorian moving through with storm surge here, 10 to 15 feet, right? This is very significant. So the weather is great right now across much of the Bahamas, but across parts of them, we will likely see very significant storm surge, leading them and many locations in the Bahamas to be underwater. So please take the appropriate precautions and take necessary actions now. Dorian is coming your way. It's got its sights on the Bahamas and then thereafter the mainland United States. The satellite pictures are ominous. They continue to be that way, with an eye now showing up not only on their infrared but also on the visible, meaning that the skies have cleared out. There is some subsidence, some descent at high altitudes that's getting it pretty low down in the middle of it. What that does is that warms it in the middle, lowers the pressures, and then in response to that, the winds pick up. As the pressure gets lower, the winds go up. We're going to see that sort of take place, I think, significantly, maybe even as early as later on today or tonight. They're the hurricane hunters in there. They've been flying around this thing all day long. They continue to find winds of about 110 miles per hour, and we will watch that pressure come down and the winds go up, I think, in due time. Maybe not yet, but not far from now. Hurricane force winds extend outward, I don't know, probably about, well, according to this, 25 miles. That's just a guess. A little bit in some quadrants, maybe a little bit more, in others a little bit less. But that's about the size of storm we're dealing with. It's not that big a storm now, but it will probably get bigger going forward. It's not only going to get stronger, it's going to get bigger. There's the northward movement that we've seen over the last, say, a couple of days. That is now turned into a northwestward movement in response, in part, to this area of low pressure, among other things. There's a whole bunch of factors, of course, that are controlling the steering, but the circulation around this, I mean, you can just imagine that. bringing it now toward the west-northwest and eventually westward as that low gets out of the way and the pathway opens up for Dorian to resume its assault on areas in the western Atlantic, including the Bahamas and eventually the mainland United States. Now, there's still some options here for Dorian eventually. This map shows you some ideas here that there's still some possibility that the landfall of Dorian doesn't take place until maybe on its northward bend here, and that could be Georgia or South Carolina. There's still some chance of that, Liana, but the most likely scenario is a direct landfall here in Florida, and then it moves and crawls up the coast ever so slowly, carrying dangerous impacts for days thereafter. Liana, back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Postel. We do have Mayor Carlos Jimenez of the Miami-Dade County having a press conference right now. Let's go ahead and listen in.
For those on our special needs list to make sure that we have the correct addresses for you for evacuation assistance. We will begin picking up our residents on that special needs call list tomorrow morning. If you say you do not need help, you will be bumped to the bottom of the special needs list. So you must be absolutely sure that you are self-sufficient before asking us to pull you off that list. We may not get back to you if we put you on the bottom of that list. Yesterday, the State Attorney General activated the number to call to ensure that there is no price gouging in advance of the storm. That number is 866-966-7226. Earlier this year, every household received our hurricane readiness guide. You can download the guide from miamidade.gov. It has information in English, Spanish, and in Creole. We also have a free app called Ready Miami-Dade. Finally, please take the time to sign up for Miami-Dade alerts. Now I will answer any questions that you have in English. Yes, sir.
Mayor, can you touch a little bit on some of the high-rise or the high construction cranes that are up?
I can get, have we figured that out yet? With our emergency managers, Frank Rollison, if you could come up and see what we're doing with the cranes. I know there are a lot of cranes up there, and there is a certain way to get them down. I think the state has preempted us on that. So, Frank, what do we know about the cranes?
Well, we know that they're up, and we know that they're not going to come down. Hopefully they're not going to come down accidentally either during the storm. But they are designed to take this weather. They're designed to spin, and the county attempted to, or did pass some regulations dealing with them, and then we were ended up preempted by the state that said that the local authorities couldn't have any control over the cranes. So they're up for now, and hopefully they'll stay that way.
Mr. Mayor, you have signed this emergency declaration. Does that mean, among other things, that the EOC...
Just listening to officials in Miami-Dade County, including Mayor Carlos Jimenez, discussing the preparations that they're doing ahead of Hurricane Dorian. In fact, they did ensure that no price gouging was happening ahead of the storm, and they were just discussing the high-rise building cranes above that and assuring people that they are designed to take this type of weather, and they also encourage people with special needs to be on a list. All right, well, we have images of President Donald Trump getting a briefing on Dorian as the president was provided an overview of the hurricane's impact on Puerto Rico, the United States Virgin Islands, and neighboring islands, as well as the ongoing response efforts there. President Trump directed federal agencies to continue their efforts to protect lives, promote preparedness efforts, and expedite authorized assistance to areas that have been affected and are still in the path of this dangerous storm during this federally supported time. Now, here's the latest on what we do know about Dorian. GasBuddy says 50% of gas stations in Miami and Gainesville are out of fuel. That's still a couple of days ahead of Dorian's arrival. Florida's governor has activated several guardsmen for Dorian's response, and we do have Florida Atlantic University that has canceled classes starting at 12:30 today. The university will remain closed through at least Monday, but staff must report. And one of the main impacts we're going to have to watch for in Florida is the heavy rain. Take a look at how much rain we are expecting. Of course, the Bahamas, the northern tip, getting slammed with heavy rain, but we're still watching the threat for dangerous rainfall totals from now into next Thursday associated with Hurricane Dorian. We're still looking at 5 to 8, but again, these numbers can change, and they likely will as Hurricane Dorian continues to head our way. So take a look at what we're expecting. The potential for flash flooding is definitely there. The entire region is super saturated. Notice in this dark green zone, it takes up almost the entire state of Florida for the possibility of flash flooding. So this is Sunday through Wednesday, but even extending up even further inland, it's possible to see that flash flood threat thanks to all this heavy rain. And with that said, it's already been super saturated. Take a look at all these upward arrows right here. That is showing us that the rainfall totals have been actually above average since June 1st across Florida. So that takes into account Miami, Tampa, Daytona Beach, West Palm Beach, and Orlando. I mean, we're talking about several feet of rain already to be had, and we're still expecting several more feet as we get through the next couple of days. But all in all, if we take a look at a couple of different forecast models, we'll notice that the overall track and trend of how much rain we are expecting is similar. It's just the exact location that changes. Take a look at the European model. Over the next 7 days, the main bullseye of the heavy rain, I'm going to change this to white right here. This zone right here, that corresponds to the heaviest rain. That's the European model. Let's show you the GFS. If I go ahead and remove that, now similar totals, notice a couple of feet of rain expected, but now it's moved and shifted well inland, tracking with Dorian. So again, we're fine tuning these details as Dorian, we continue to get more information. But if we show you, I mean, we're talking about flooding and heavy rain. And in fact, it encompasses 27% of hurricane deaths. That's accounting between these years, 1963 to 2012. And of course, storm surge is the big one. Half of the deaths are associated with storm surge. Well, with the forecast cone covering the entire state of Florida, millions of people are making a last-minute rush for supplies. As Jen Carfagno reports, the threat from Hurricane Dorian grows, and so do the concerns families in the path of this storm's fury.
Just worry about, just contaminated water, worried about the electricity. How long is the electricity going to go out if it goes out?
Millions in the path of the storm are stockpiling food and water, topping off fuel tanks, and gathering supplies for what could be several days of worrisome times. In Miami, long lines formed at big box stores and gas pumps in a race against the clock as Hurricane Dorian approaches. Even storm veterans are worried.
It's going to be like real scary this time, because I really think this is going to be one that we have never experienced besides Andrew.
Keeping up with demand is a challenge for grocery stores in Palm Beach County, where shelves get emptied almost as fast as they get stocked. One grocery store prepared to stay open as long as they can to make sure people have what they need to survive.
As soon as everything's passed or up until whenever we can, we're going to be open because we're here to serve the community.
Palm Beach County is preparing to evacuate the community once the deadliest part of a hurricane threatens families.
Evacuations will be dependent on the storm surge, not wind speeds, the storm surge.
Florida's governor put the entire state under alert. He is urging people to stay vigilant and follow the changes in the storm's path.
So be prepared, take the action that you need to, and listen to your local officials. Follow the local reports, follow the Weather Channel, follow the National Hurricane Center so that you have the best information available.
And Florida plans to suspend tolls on its highways to make evacuations smoother. It is also working with nearby states to ease road restrictions to allow supplies like gas and water to get in faster on big rigs. And preparations are underway all across Florida, including Cocoa Beach, and that's where you find NBC's Jay Gray. And Jay, how is the city preparing to keep residents and tourists safe over the next couple of days?
Liana, a big process here, and they're just beginning it, getting people organized and ready for this storm as it moves in. I want to give you a real-time look at what's happening on the beach right now, and it is literally a day at the beach. Folks are out, not nearly the crowd you would expect on the Friday going into a long weekend, but still a lot of people taking advantage of the calm conditions here, getting another beach day in if they can before the storm makes its turn and starts heading this way. When you talk about the calm conditions, that's what officials, first responders here are keen on. They say use these conditions at this point to be prepared, to make sure that you are ready before the conditions take a dramatic turn for the worse. And with that in mind, we've seen people lined up at grocery stores, lined up at gas stations, doing everything they need to do to make sure they are ready. Shoppers in Fort Lauderdale gathering food as well as water and medicine that they will need, some saying that they may need it for a full week or more. They plan to lose electricity in some of the hardest hit areas. Some people could be isolated. So first responders want to make sure that anyone who may ride this storm out is ready for that ride. As far as evacuations go, still way too early for that. And frankly, that can't happen until we know where this storm's going to strike. Right now, we don't have a clear indication of that. And so what officials are saying at this point is pack what you need, be ready. If your zone becomes one that has a mandatory evacuation, be ready to get out. Don't have to pack when things take a turn for the worse. Instead, be ready, jump in the car, move to higher ground. So it's all about preparations right now, and will be over the next couple of days as we watch and wait to see where this storm goes next. Liana?
All right, thanks so much, Jay. Live in Cocoa Beach, Florida. See, that's just one location that is starting to prepare, but we have many other locations along the coast of Florida that is already starting to show signs of preparing. And this is the reason why. If we show you the future radar, starting the clock at 1 p.m. this afternoon, Dorian slowly making its way through this weekend. The Labor Day weekend will stay very stormy, even ahead of Dorian's arrival as we get into 8 p.m. Saturday night and Saturday evening. It's really not until Sunday morning where it's reaching the northern tip of Bahamas, where we still have those hurricane watches in place at the moment. And so that takes us into Sunday 10 a.m. Now that's tracking that core of Dorian, but ahead of that core will be this tropical storm force winds, and we'll see those arrive as Sunday morning through the Bahamas and getting close to Miami by Sunday night. So that's overnight period, moving inland by Monday 8 p.m. So that's what we have to track. Now, depending on which model we're looking at, things can be a little different. Take a look at the European model as we take a quick look at this. Notice where it's at. Intensity is very, very strong, but if we take a quick look at the GFS model, the location is very similar. The GFS has actually changed just a little bit. But we are helping you get ready for Dorian next on Weather Center Live. The steps you need to take right now to prepare for this dangerous hurricane, which is just days away.
I made the decision.
What exactly it is, I mean, it's one of our big tools to get information out of hurricanes.
It is a piece of instrumentation that is dropped from the hurricane hunters. Let's just say they're at 10,000 feet. There are other altitudes they fly as well. And as it descends through the hurricane, spiraling around through the wind, it is collecting data on its descent the entire way until it splashes down in the ocean. Here, by the way, this is, I believe, the parachute. It's kind of cool.
There it goes.
So this thing is flying around inside the hurricane and collecting data on the way in. So we not only then have a measurement of how strong it is at the surface, but how strong it is aloft and what the relative humidities are. And that's all very important data for us understanding how strong Dorian is or how strong it might get. And temperature as well. All kinds of valuable information throughout a vertical depth of the storm.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the crucial and critical ways that we get information because, I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be able to really get any information. Boats and ships, they avoid these storms. They avoid hurricanes.
That's true. Just one quick piece of information. The latest recon is in there, finding winds about 130 miles per hour, only 1,000 feet above the ocean surface.
Yeah. All right, well, here's a look at the forecast cone. Of course, you have that westward track that is tracking it straight into northern Bahamas, but then it does make that little slowdown and shift to the north next.
The Lab is brought to you by State Farm. There for when things go wrong, but also...
As of the last advisory, we now have a Category 3 hurricane, a major hurricane with 115 mile per hour winds. A central pressure has come down now to 970 millibars, still on a northwest track at about 10 miles per hour, and the center of circulation about 445 miles east of the northwestern Bahamas. So that puts it well to the north of the Turks and Caicos, well to the east of the Bahamas, but there is the eye, which shows hurricane force winds about 25 miles out from the center, and we'll continue to see those hurricane force winds even get stronger, we believe, before it makes its way toward the Bahamas and eventually toward the coast of the U.S.
Yeah, could very well be dealing with a Cat 4 by the time we do see this approach the U.S. So with Hurricane Dorian nearing Florida, there are still at least 2 full days to prepare before those tropical storm force winds arrive on shore. Our Stephanie Abrams shows us what you need to be doing right now to get ready for the storm.
The tropics have come to life. A storm is threatening. The clock is ticking. It's time to take action. We're just 48 hours out. A hurricane watch is imminent or has just been issued. Get your car filled with gas and make sure you have plenty of cash. And now's the time to check your evacuation kit. Make sure you have a few days of food and water, and grab any last-minute items. And check your insurance papers and other important documents and make sure they're up to date and saved electronically. Also, protect the documents that you are taking with you by putting them in a waterproof envelope. And don't forget to keep tabs on the forecast.
New models are just coming in, so be ready to adjust to any changes in the storm track or intensity. And remember that tropical storm...
The storm is growing stronger and getting closer. We're only 24 hours out. A hurricane warning is up. So finish securing windows and openings with shutters or plywood. Remove all loose items on your property and follow advice of local officials and evacuate if told to do so. Now, the outer bands of the storm are just coming ashore, and it's time to be at your safe location. Family members and friends, they need to know where you are, so share your plans. And remember, all your electronics need to be fully charged, because with a storm like this, let me tell you, the power, it could be out for days. And the weather's going downhill fast. Landfall is upon us. Trees are starting to come down. Now is the time to shelter in place and ride out the storm.
It's also important to have plans in place for your pets. Make sure you have plenty of food and water for them, and make sure you bring them with you if you do have to evacuate. Nick?
We want to bring in now the director for the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham. Ken, we thank you so much for joining us. Dorian, well, we got the latest advisory, now a major hurricane. What indicators do you have that we might even go a category higher than Category 3?
Yeah, that's what we've been talking about, this thing actually becoming a Cat 4 with time. Because if you think about it, I mean, this structure is looking healthier and healthier. You're seeing the eye wall. You're starting to see, you know, the upper levels of the storm. You're really breathing more. I mean, really a healthier system. And there's no indication that we see that would inhibit it. We don't have the shear. The hurricane hunters get in there. They're not seeing any indications of that. Look at all the warm water. I mean, the slower movement over that warm water means there's more time to get stronger and stronger. But it's a gradual strengthening, and we still think it could be a Cat 4 by the time it makes landfall.
And of course, this looks as if it's going to be a big danger for the Bahamas and then eventually to Florida as well. We've been talking about all the unknowns in terms of what the path is. You've given us, you know, your best scenario, but what kind of variables could there still be?
Yeah, there's so many variables here, but you know, it's interesting to see, you know, you start comparing the models and you start seeing a model go to the north, you see a model go to the south, but here's the reality. The reality is we don't really take that into account when it comes to moving the forecast too much. We blend those models together. We really try to stick to a path that encompasses those impacts. So we really need to remind everybody, be careful paying attention just to that path, because you think about this, hurricane force winds 25, 30 miles away from the center, and we got tropical storm force winds. I mean, we're looking over 100 miles away from the center. So any way you look at it, even if you have some small changes in this track, you're still going to have a lot of rain. You're going to have dangerous winds and the storm surge. You can get 10 foot plus in some areas. That's typical of a Category 4.
Ken, just real quickly, I know a lot of people are keeping their fingers crossed that this still won't make a landfall, maybe just kind of sort of brush the coastline. Any chance of that?
I'll tell you, we have that in the cone. So 2/3 of the time you can see that center inside this cone somewhere based on our air over the last 5 years. But we got to remember this, you know, for preparedness purposes, you just got to really be ready to be prepared no matter what that track is.
Ken, we thank you so much for taking time out to talk with us. Obviously, we will continue to follow the information coming out of the National Hurricane Center and bring you the latest. Right now, we're looking at a possible landfall in Florida by the time we get into Monday or perhaps even Tuesday.
The Lab is brought to you by State Farm. There for when things go wrong, but also here to help life go right.
A lot of the general consensus right now does appear to be a Florida landfall, somewhere maybe between West Palm Beach and Orlando. So again, we've got to work all of that out, but we certainly have a large cone of uncertainty right now.
A
lot of bad scenarios for the outcome, one good one yet, which we hope for.
So one of the things I'm looking at is the reconnaissance data coming in real time here, giving us hour by hour, even minute by minute assessment on the strength and movement of Dorian, which we need to give out to everybody to know where it's going and what it's going to be when it makes landfall.
We'll use the breaking now advisory just in, and then Dorian poses significant risk for Florida.
30 away, Tevin crew.
Got 5 crews out tomorrow already. If this plays out like it is, and it doesn't take that good scenario, it'll be one of the longest marathons that we've had for storm coverage.
And that's a look at how we're getting ready behind the scenes at the Weather Channel. We're in this with you for the long haul as you get your homes ready and change your travel plans. We'll do our best to keep you informed and get you the most up-to-date information on the Weather Channel, always helping you make those decisions. Right now, I think the message is do your preparations now, if you live in Florida especially. Speaking of Florida, let's get to Orlando right now, where meteorologist Felicia Combs is and giving us the latest there. Felicia. We are now up to 115-mile-per-hour storm. It's still a Category 3. The overall direction it has not changed a ton either. West-northwest at 9. Nick, still well off to the east of the Bahamas.
We might be beginning to see that westward turn. You know, we've been expecting it to turn basically from the northwest to a more westerly direction, and that might be starting now. The last advisory had it just at northwest, but now it's west-northwest. But the speed, as you mentioned, really hasn't changed all that much, about 9 miles per hour. And the center, of course, has changed. 420 miles east of the northwestern Bahamas is where it is. And it's well over warm water, and strengthening, as you mentioned, is expected here. So we will continue to follow this. Another change that we have, too, is we're watching the northwestern Bahamas. We had hurricane watches. Now those have turned into warnings, and so now warnings out for hurricane-force winds there in the northwestern Bahamas. There's the tight circulation.
Still looking very healthy.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And there's the forecast. This is a brand new cone now, but I'm just looking at it here for the first time, and really, Julie, not seeing too many changes here, except for the fact that it looks like the winds are probably going to be stronger by Sunday evening. I think earlier we had 130 mile per hour winds, and now that's up to 140 mile per hour winds. Those continuing all the way through the Bahamas is going to be horrible news here for the northern Bahamas.
And into Florida as well, still remaining at 140 mile per hour storm. So still a major hurricane right now. As Nick mentioned, we have a hurricane warning. That is a change since the last advisory. This would be for the northern portion of the Bahamas, including Freeport. Also a hurricane watch for the southern end there of the Bahamas. So we are looking at a warning, meaning that, you know, within 48 hours, hurricane conditions are what we need to watch for here now in terms of the wind intensity. And of course, we're going to be dealing with storm surge, flooding rain as well, and a very powerful storm. Really, I think that there's not a lot in its way, Nick, unfortunately. It's going to enter an environment that is really conducive to intensification. So we're looking at perhaps a Category 4 storm coming into play.
Yeah, the warm water, the lack of shear, all of those things that the National Hurricane Center is taking into account with this forecast strengthening of 140 mile per hour Category 4 hurricane moving into the Bahamas and maintaining its strength. Really, the islands, even a direct hit on the islands here is not going to mean much lessening, if any, of the strength, just because you know, the islands are small and low. But there it is right now in a very discernible eye, well to the north of the Turks and Caicos, well over open water, moving into that environment where we're going to continue to see strengthening, but it's already strong. Yeah. Category 3, 115 mile per hour winds.
And after it moves over the Bahamas, it's going to encounter even more favorable conditions. So again, a very powerful storm. Weather Underground is next with more.
So there's your depression. You just want 5 o'clock to get here, because depression is multiple symptoms that can hold you back. Ugh, time for a change. And your doctor tells you about Chintellix, a prescription medicine for adults with depression. And there's this overall relief, sweet. and Chintellix had no significant impact on weight in clinical trials.
Tell your doctor right away if you have worsening depression, unusual changes in mood, behavior, or thoughts of suicide.
Now we'll examine the suspense still surrounding Dorian as forecast models struggle to figure out where it will go. Plus, he's going to break down how Dorian resembles past hurricanes like Matthew, Francis, and even Katrina. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Weather Underground this evening. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis, and just in, we've got the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center. This is in, and it basically maintains strength. Still 115 miles per hour here, Dr. Nab. What, if anything, changes from this point going forward?
I think its future strength over the next couple of days will be internal structural changes, but it's got plenty of warm water, and the wind shear in the atmosphere appears weak enough that we could have a major hurricane all the way through the northwestern Bahamas and to the Florida coastline. So maximum sustained winds 115 miles an hour. We're going to have multiple aircraft in the system tonight, both NOAA and Air Force planes going in. We'll give you those data when they become available. Now, it's starting to turn, okay? We've had that northwestward motion for the last couple of days, but it is now turning west-northwest, and the forward speed is slowing down. So it's in the process of making that turn as we've been expecting. Pressure down to 970 millibars. That will probably keep going down. Okay, let's take a look at the updates to watches and warnings. As of the 5 p.m. advisory, hurricane warnings have been issued for all of the northwestern Bahamas except for Andros Island here, which is under a hurricane watch. But the warning includes Nassau there on New Providence and Freeport in Grand Bahama. So all these areas under a hurricane warning, expecting hurricane conditions somewhere in those areas within the next 36 hours. That's issued by the government of the Bahamas. And of course, they coordinate with the Hurricane Center to disseminate that in the Hurricane Center's advisory. So here's the new track and intensity forecast. Generally speaking, no big changes. We'll detail what the models have been doing, but the models are going to go back and forth and have lots of different solutions from one run to the next. If you hang your hat on any one individual model, you can easily be very misled because the next run could be very different. Hurricane Center is staying as consistent as they can given the available guidance. The consistent message is continued westward motion into the weekend with continued intensification. Could it peak out higher than this? Could it go to Category 5? It certainly could. Could there be ups and downs along the way here? Yes. But for the next 3 days, a general westward motion, increasingly slow. Look how those points get closer and closer together. And then the really hard part of the forecast and the most concerning part of the forecast for Florida is the slower motion still on Monday into Tuesday with some kind of general slow turn to the north, but there could be a lot of stalling, meandering, looping in there, and then eventually, maybe by the middle of next week, it's starting to get going toward the north. Possibly, could it cross Florida into the Gulf? Yes. Possibly, could it make a turn just at the last minute before Florida and the center doesn't come ashore in Florida? That's also possible, but there are a lot of possibilities of it making landfall in Florida. Let's look at the timing here. The Bahamas and the northwest Bahamas are under a warning now because Sunday morning is when we expect the arrival of winds of tropical storm force, so now we're within 36 hours of that. For Florida, it's Sunday night into Monday morning, so we could have hurricane watches going up later tonight or into tomorrow morning. Here it is on the satellite view. You can see how it's starting to make that turn, and the eye has become much more apparent, so this will start to be a scarier and scarier sight, Mike, as this really starts to look like the beast of a major hurricane we've been anticipating.
We've got a long way to go, too. It's going to be days and days that we're going to be watching this one still. Dr. Nab, thank you. Let's bring you the latest on what we know right now about Hurricane Dorian. President Trump approving Florida's request for an emergency declaration ahead of the storm. Florida Power and Light has secured 13,000 employees to be ready for potential power outages after Dorian hits. Atlanta Motor Speedway opening up its camping facilities for Dorian evacuees. So if you are maybe headed to the Atlanta metro area, it's a place that you could go. If you've got a camper or something like that, you can make your way to the campground there and have a safe place to go there. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of questions when it comes to Dorian, and the things in the atmosphere, Dr. Nab, that are steering it, that are pushing along, it's not clear cut.
No, it's not, and it's all about the ridging to the north. How strong is it when, and when could there be a break in the ridge to allow it to go north? Now, when we look at what's going on this evening, got a very dominant high-pressure ridge over the western Atlantic, and it extends over to the southeastern United States. Now, watch what happens as we go over the next couple of days. Go into Sunday. Okay, we still have ridging to the north, but maybe off the southeast coast of the U.S., it's not quite as strong as before, so that's why the slowing in the forward motion. So this is the GFS model through Sunday. But look how slow it is from Sunday to Monday. The northwestern Bahamas could be dealing with hurricane conditions for more than a day with that slow motion.
It seems like that high's pushed it, but this high's blocking it from going any farther west.
Exactly right. And then you have weak ridging to the north, and that is allowing it for a slow motion. But eventually, when does this ridge get weak enough to allow there to be a path to the north? But none of that appears that it's going to happen quickly. So this is the GFS model next Tuesday. It's there in the east coast of central Florida, and then slowly moving northward into Thursday through a break in the ridge. Now that's just one model run. Let's look at the European model run. Okay, very similar through Sunday. That's the high agreement part of the forecast. Through Monday, barely moves. Through Tuesday, barely moves. But then this particular model run stays just offshore of the east coast of Florida, and then could make landfall up in the Carolinas. But I wanted to highlight, Mike, look at all of these scenarios from the GFS, the European ensemble. Several of them come ashore in Florida. Do not take that one European model run that stays offshore to gospel and say, oh, this is going to miss Florida. That could cost lives if we make decisions based on that.
You would want that to happen model run after model run and happen consistently in order for you to have some confidence in it.
Yeah, and we'd want to see some agreement in the ensembles here. Look at that agreement out here. We do not have that agreement out here. Could still get into the Gulf, could still slam into Florida, could still just miss Florida. All those are possible.
All right, Dr. Knabb, thank you very much. So let's check in on how they're preparing here in Florida. Let's take you to Orlando tonight. Meteorologist Felicia Combs is there for us this evening. One thing that we have noticed, Felicia, is that the gas stations the past couple of days have been packed. The stores have been packed.
And you know what? That's what we've been hearing, too, from everyone that we talked to on the street. They've been saying it's already been rough. It's already been rough getting gas. It's already been rough finding water. We have heard that, particularly in the Orlando area, even of this morning, about 1/3 of the gas stations were out. However, we did get some reports that the Florida Highway Patrol is now escorting those fuel tankers in Florida to the gas stations to kind of help get through those lines and replenish those fuel supplies, particularly here in Orlando. There has been just this sense that everyone is kind of preparing and knowing that, they need to take this very seriously. The international airport in Orlando is Orlando International, ceasing commercial flights as of 2 a.m. Monday, which is when things are really expected to deteriorate. Walt Disney World, though, they are saying they're continuing operations as normal until they have, more of a secure word on the path. So I kind of think that's in general what everyone here in Orlando is doing. The streets in downtown Orlando kind of empty, to say that it's a Friday afternoon on a holiday weekend. Now, granted, we have had rounds of rain here, so maybe that's part of it. But also, I do think from everyone that we've talked to, they're just really taking this storm seriously, and that's what we like to see. Everyone is getting prepared. I think what mostly people have been thinking, by Sunday evening, you really want to have everything done at the very latest. And of course, storms in the forecast every day leading up to Dorian here in Florida, typical summertime. So everyone is just trying to get prepared. So I'm here in Orlando. We also have Mike Seidel in Melbourne, and he is keeping a close eye on how things are going there. Mike.
Hey, good afternoon, Felicia, here from the Space Coast, where everybody, that's all they're talking about. Restaurants and bars. I've been kind of overhearing people talking about the models. Is it going to, is it not going to happen? They bring up a lot from 1979, Hurricane David. That was the last one that really took a swipe here. It came right along the coast as a 100-mile-an-hour Category 2 hurricane. And then 3 years ago, we had Matthew, and they were ready for the worst. And Matthew stayed just far enough offshore that winds here on the coast were no more than about 50 to 60 miles an hour. So they've been very, very lucky. Right now, though, we're watching what's going on with travel. And out in the distance is one of those cruise ships that goes out of Port Canaveral. And they've made some significant adjustments. If you're taking a cruise out of there, I'm sure you've been notified from your cruise director, your cruise company, that things are changing. This one went out today. Others are going out tomorrow. And some of the Sunday cruises are shifting back to Saturday. Let's bring in Mark Claycomb, who is the PIO of the Melbourne City Police. And Mark, we're still several days away from any kind of weather. What kind of plans are underway here in the city of Melbourne?
Well, the city and actually every agency in the county has been planning for this for a couple days. We're having several meetings a day to make sure we keep on track with the new information. We're doing exactly what we asked the public to do, which is stay tuned and monitor it. So many things can change even now before the storm makes landfall, potentially Monday. So we are preparing the city for it and our residents for it. If there are evacuations that are called for, we're preparing for the traffic flows and hunkering down for the storm and making sure our people are safe.
Yeah, and you went through Matthew 3 years ago. What was that like? Because you prepared for a lot worse storm, and this has the potential to stay farther offshore, although we're a long way away from calling that.
Correct. Matthew was one of the few that we knew was tracking for us, and until the very end we thought it was coming to us. We always prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And in this case, it's tracking further south than we originally anticipated, but we are prepared for it coming up the state and creating an incredible amount of rain and the flooding that may be associated with that, even if it's not a major hurricane.
Yeah, and the EOC is going to activate their center on, did you say Sunday?
Looking right now that we're planning on Sunday to go into emergency mode, but that's if everything stays on track the way it is right now. So we're monitoring it, and we can always adjust that as needed.
And I just saw on social media that Brevard County schools are closed on Tuesday.
Correct.
And all activities, after-school activities, now canceled from tomorrow through Tuesday.
That is correct.
So more meetings, more planning?
Absolutely. We'll be meeting each day to make sure we have the latest information to make the best choices for our people, for their safety, and for the residents.
Okay, thanks, Mark Claycomb, PIO with Brevard County and also the city of Melbourne. And one thing we got going for us, Mike Bettis, is time. It's time to prepare, time to know your plan, get your medicines in order. We've got several days before we get the first impacts from Dorian here on the Space Coast in Brevard County. So, don't waste time. Get going and get moving. I have seen some buildings here on the Barrier Island that have boarded up.
Listen, it's never too soon, that's for sure. Mike, thanks so much. As Mike mentioned, we still got a little bit of time, but let's bring in now the director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham, joining us live from Miami this evening. Ken, it is good to talk to you again this evening. Talk about the latest advisory that came in at 5 o'clock and a little bit more about the track here, because some of the models now are hinting potentially, especially the European model, hinting at more of an eastward track once it gets toward Florida.
And you can see that reflected in our forecast as well. When we get these ensemble forecasts, we try to take all the different models and put those together. So what happens is it nudges it a little bit towards the right, a little bit towards the east coast here, but still a lot of impact. So even though we've moved the forecast a little bit here, we're still talking about a major hurricane. I mean, a Category 4 by the approaches the Texas, the Florida coast, and really anybody in the Gulf Coast we've been talking about for a while getting ready. But now we're starting to see some more indications of this turning towards the north. But look at the length of time here. I mean, you're talking, this is Tuesday, that's Wednesday. That's a long time to have hurricane force winds.
And Ken, let's reinforce this message about not letting our guard down, because I've already seen some of the discussion out there today. Oh, looks like some of the models say it's going to miss, and I fear people are starting to let their guard down just a little bit on the east coast of Florida. This could still come barreling in as a high-end major hurricane and maybe affect multiple metro areas in a very significant way.
Yeah, Dr. Knabb, let's really talk about this, because that's been the #1 question that I seem to be getting all day. Everybody comparing the different models, but everybody has to really understand those are deterministic. That's one solution. We're using dozens and dozens of these solutions and blending those together. You can't let your guard down. We're still talking a very powerful hurricane, a Category 4 system here, high winds, 140-mile-an-hour winds, slow movement, lots of rainfall. We still have to be prepared. Even though this shifts back and forth a little bit, there's no change in the real impacts of this system. It's still some air. Look at the cone. So 2/3 of the time we can still get this center inside this cone. So anybody in these areas still has to be ready for these devastating impacts.
And Ken, when do you think, given the current timing, that a hurricane watch might be issued for some portion of the east coast of Florida?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been a situation that's been wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. With this slower movement, you know, we've backed up the time here. So if you look at the onset of these tropical storm force winds, you know, you're really looking at, you know, Monday morning, even Sunday night. So if you back that up about 48 hours, we're going to have a ton of conversations about this all night tonight. So tomorrow's the day that we'll start looking at it. And we want to be really aware of where we put out those watches, because, you know, that's a case that, you know, we want people to be aware. We want to get the right areas. We want to do this right. So it looks like we're going to back that up 48 hours because of the slow movement. We're going to have a lot of conversations about this overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning.
Ken, thanks so much for talking to us this evening. That is Ken Graham, the director for the National Hurricane Center, live in Miami this evening. We see pretty high confidence next 2 days in the forecast. How difficult is it then, beyond that, when the forecast track slows down? How difficult is it then to determine where it goes?
When steering currents collapse, the models get inconsistent, and then we as the humans have to be consistent in our message about what is still possible. And it is still possible that this could come ashore or close enough to cause terrible damage anywhere in the east coast of Florida, maybe the whole east coast of Florida.
All right, Dr. Knapp, thank you. And stay tuned. When we come back, what you need to be doing now in preparation for Dorian.
Doug. Hour 36 of the stakeout. As soon as the homeowners arrive, we'll inform them that Liberty Mutual customers.
The Bahamas include 700 islands and keys, though only about 30 are inhabited. Stretching across more than 500 miles in the Atlantic, the northern Grand Bahama Island lies only 60 miles from the Florida coast. Roughly 400,000 people live in the Bahamas, more than half in the capital city of Nassau on Paradise Island. 75% of the country's economy is driven by tourism. But the country's low and flat terrain make it vulnerable to hurricanes. And since it stretches for hundreds of miles, these powerful storms may devastate one area while leaving others unharmed. On average, a hurricane passes the Bahamas roughly every 2 years, with a direct hit every 4. Though recent storms have hit the country hard, the worst of Hurricane Irma spared most of the Bahamas. But to the extreme south, Ragged Island lost the majority of its infrastructure during the Category 5 storm. In October 2016, Matthew made landfall on Grand Bahama Island as a Category 4 hurricane. It had winds of 130 miles an hour and an 8-foot storm surge, causing more than $400 million in damage. And in 2015, Hurricane Joaquin hit the southern islands as a Cat 4 with an 18-foot storm surge recorded on Long Island. During Joaquin, the U.S. cargo ship El Faro disappeared and sank near Crooked Island, killing all 33 crew members on board.
Well, we want you to stick around. Coming up here on Weather Underground, sandbags, a very effective way to defend against flooding. But we've got the right way and the wrong way to do it. We're going to show you straight up ahead. And wrapping up a hurricane home protection series, peeling back the layers to show you how you can arm your home against hurricane force winds.
If you have moderate to severe...
Chris, what can we do to make sure that our shingles have a greater chance of staying on the roof?
Right, it's a great point. So one of the things that's easy for a homeowner to do, sort of a DIY project, is to go to your local box store, get a tube of roof cement, get on a ladder. Be very careful when you're doing that. Make sure the ladder is firmly planted. But what you really want to focus on is getting the adhesive right here within the front inch or so and spacing it out about every 11 inches. To get that roof cement down, go ahead and push down on it firmly to make sure that it gets a good seal. And then you can continue on with that process, moving across the roof, putting a dab about every 11 inches or so underneath that tab. That will make sure that it's well adhered and won't lift off easily. You can see the strip that was originally there. In some older roofs, as they get age on them, you will see that those dry out and they lose some of their adhesion, and they do start to peel up just as I pulled them up there. The other thing is while you're focusing on that first row, you may want to just take a look up your roof, see if there's other shingles. If there is something that you can easily reach and feel comfortable getting to, by all means, go ahead and get there. Get to that shingle and put another bit of roof cement onto it. But the key is doing it safely, right? Once you get onto the roof, in hot weather, these things can become slippery. The granules will actually lose adhesion into the asphalt shingles, and that becomes like a water slide in a sense. So safety is the paramount thing here when you're getting onto a roof. And if you don't feel comfortable, you should be hiring a contractor to get to that.
All right, so if I can safely get to this first row of shingles on my ladder, and I only adhere these shingles, How much benefit is just doing this first row going to give me?
Doing that is key, as well as any of them, but especially at the front, because once that starts to peel up, you get this sort of cascading or unzipping effect where the next layer is going to go, and you're starting with the exact first row here, so stopping that one at least gives you some benefit to it. It's not to say that you won't have that problem later on up on the roof, but getting that first one is key too, because there's so much going on right here at the front edge. You've got flashing that curls around the front typically as well. And basically all the layers are starting here that become part of your roof.
But the key here is multiple layers of protection. You want to keep the shingles on, but you still want to have those additional layers of protection beneath the shingles.
Absolutely. They all work together. It's like a big sandwich.
That first row, I didn't think about that. The first row right along the gutters is really important.
Yeah, and that's actually something that you could go check in advance of Dorian, is to see if that first row of shingles is well glued down, and you could go to a hardware store and get the right kind of glue to fasten those first rows of shingles down. You don't have to get up on the roof to do that, just get up on a ladder, and that could prevent the first row of shingles from going, which could connect and tear the rest of them off. So something you could do now.
And if you do that now, you might be good for a couple of years. That industrial adhesive is pretty strong stuff. You may not have to do it again for several more years.
It is, yeah, and then later on we're going to talk about other ways to keep that roof attached to the rest of your house.
All right, you're looking forward to that, Dr. Nab, thank you. And still to come here on Weather Underground, I'm going to cover more of Dorian, but want to take you into the St. Louis metro area where we have severe weather right now and a tornado warning. A tornado moving northeast at 20 miles per hour. Franklin, St. Charles, and St. Louis counties all under tornado warnings right now. Potentially around Wildwood and eventually Chesterfield. We urge you to take shelter quickly here. Potential rotation there detected by radar, circling it right there just to the southwest of Wildwood. Get to an interior room of your home, away from windows and exterior walls. If you have a basement, great place to be. Again, tornado warning in the St. Louis metro.